And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Today, it is all about the ever ambitious Charlotte FC, and we are joined by Jorge from TopBin90 to help dive right into it, but not too deep. As everybody remembers, this is not so deep dive. Jorge's, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited to be on. Andrew, thank you so much for inviting me today.
Yeah, man, super happy we get this going. I love chatting this. I'm actually in South Carolina, so I make trips up to Charlotte all the time,
Let's go.
watching the team play. Usually when Red Bull get there, but I'll be there for Germany, Benfica, and I'll be there for maybe this is a spoiler, but I'll be there for the Red Bull versus Charlotte Eastern Conference final in
Nice. I
what
like
eight
it.
months. But we'll
Achievement.
get to
Love
that
it.
later. What we should do right now, we should talk scarves. So it's scarf of the week time. What have you brought for us?
So what I've brought is a special edition custom Thompson Group scarf,
Okay.
Charlotte FC, you know.
Yeah.
So what I love about this scarf, man, is I've done some work with the Thompson Group before, and they help a lot of kids that are in need in the Charlotte area. It's a great local nonprofit. They work with a lot of kids with like mental health issues,
Mhm.
kids that have suicidal thoughts, and they're really doing a great job of trying to combat that. So, I mean, I love that. Anytime that we could do something to support a good cause, right? That's one of the things that I think when you're looking at an ethos of what we're trying to build at Top Bid 90, that's important to us, being able to relate to the community and give back to the community.
Love it, love it, love it. That's what we love this little segment for Scarf of the Week because every scarf has a meaning, right? Everybody you
100%.
it's just the greatest part of it, and and I love hearing people share stories about the stuff that they're passionate about with stuff like that because that's what matters, right? When I show you this one, it's relatively, I'm going to say, bland, right? It's the Charlotte FC, it's the Argyle, sort of just on both sides. But it was the first time I went to see Charlotte in person when Red Bull tied them 1-1 last season.
Okay.
And it was the first time I got to see a cousin who was living in Charlotte in 3 years or so. So we got to go out to the game together, catch up. I saw the family. It was, just this has, it doesn't have a lot going on, but it's got a lot of memories in it, and that's what it's all about.
Nice. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So, listen, we're here talking Charlotte today, and I like to label them as the staple for ambition in MLS. These guys, every window for the last two or three windows, have actively been in rumors, and not just like, oh, they're looking to sign this third division Romanian guy like Red Bull used to be. They are out there putting their names in the hat for a lot of big names, and this is showing what they want to do. They finished fifth in the East after earning their first MLS playoff victory. Despite what Taylor Twellman wants to say about it, that was a victory. I'm giving it to you. Dean Smith and his crew are gearing up for another run at success in 2025. Off the backing of a just pure brilliant defensive performance in 2024, it was their attack that kind of hurt them the most. 46 goals was joint least amongst playoff teams in MLS, and it led them to not getting out of the League Cup group stage, an early round three exit, or round of best of three exit from the first round. And listen, they're relocked, reloaded. They are ready to go again in 2025. They'll be in Leagues Cup, they'll be in US Open Cup, and of course, MLS and the playoffs. What were your thoughts on 24? How did you feel coming out of that season?
Yeah, honestly, going into the season versus the way the season ending was night and day, man. If you take a look just 12 months ago, Dean Smith was coming into Charlotte FC, right? First season, right? It was the Swiderski, arguably our best player last year, right? Left deadline day of the European transfer window, right? We went into the season with one DP in Enzo Copetti, who's not even here anymore, right? And so there was a lot of uncertainty going into the season. And, as the season progressed, Dean solidified the team. Obviously, you mentioned the lack of goals up front, but, defensively, we were one of the best teams, right? Only behind Seattle Sounders in goals conceded, right? And that played a big portion in us finishing fifth, right? Honestly, that best three out of series was so close, right? If you think about it, that last minute penalty that Diani committed, that arguably a penalty, right? And then we lost in PK shootouts to Orlando. So I mean, from where we started the season to where we finished, man, like I said, was night and day. And we ended the season with a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth, but that's a great thing because now that we raised our expectations coming into the season.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way. The expectations have definitely been raised, and it comes off of the back of some really, really strong additions. I mean, there are a couple really good ones that we can talk about, but I did want to throw it over to you. What did you think was the best addition that Charlotte has made so far?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it has to be Wilfred Zaha, right? Last season, one of the things that we talked about was having a talisman player. We've never had a talisman player at Charlotte. We've had good, DPs and Karol Swiderski, right? He was formidable. He did a good job, right? Abada, we still haven't seen much from him. Enzo and Kamil Yazviak were just fails, right? If we're looking at the production that they had. So we've never had a guy, and Dean mentioned this, in his first press conference this year, a guy that can really take a game when it's 0-0 and make that difference, right? And that's what Wilfred Zaha is coming in here to do. I mean, he did it at Palace multiple times, right? And so we expect that from him going into this season you know, where a game may be, 0-0, or we need somebody to produce some sort of magic. He's got to be the guy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Zaha has to be there. And I was prepping this right. I mean, he was still a rumor when I was prepping these ideas. So I was thinking like, okay, what outside of Zaha have they done? And what I'm excited to see. I love the Eric Williamson move. I think that it gives your midfield a lot of balance. But I am excited to see a full season of Pep Biel coming back on loan, not a DP. I think it's a really good move. And because I don't think 11 games was enough to show like what he could do. We watched him. I think his debut was the game I was at, and I was like, oh, I didn't think we were playing him, and he came in, he changed it. Right? We watched it. We watched this game, and it is. I mean, let's be real. It was a snooze fest. It was the two best defensive teams in the East, and we're just like, it's backwards, it's forwards, like there's nothing going on. And he came in and he changed it like with a spark. He just didn't have those players around him that could have taken it to the next level. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in a full season as well.
100%. And just to add to that too, I mean, let's not forget, like, neither him or Abada had a full preseason with Charlotte FC last year.
Right.
Abada came in February. He came in middle of the season, so he really had to adapt to the team, right? And Ashley Westwood talked about that. How he had an opportunity to finish out the season at Burnley, and Zoran, the sporting director, told them, "Hey, you really want to have a preseason under you, going into MLS." And both of those guys didn't, right? So
Mhm.
now you get that added benefit that both of these guys will spend time with this team, and also Zaha. That was one of my worries, right? I was like, when will you sign Zaha, right? Because we saw it with Abada. It took him a while. And we're able to get that business done right going into preseason, and that's really important.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You see all of these big names that you get laid on, and then you don't see them for 3 weeks because like all their visas are having trouble, or they are trying to see out the end of whatever, and they're trying to find a house, they're trying to move, bring their family or whatever, and then they get in, then they need to get settled, and it's like it's until Leagues Cup break, the old Leagues Cup break, until you get to see them at their peak anyway. It's like, well, that's not the point. So when you can get them in with a full preseason, or at least the majority of the preseason, like that gives you a little bit of excitement. So very, very excited to see that. You did have to move on from a couple players though, so I do want to ask what your thoughts are on who the biggest loss is going to be. Who are you going to miss the most?
Listen, that for me is very clear. Karol Swiderski, man. Honestly, he was kind of our guy. There were periods in that first and second season where when Carroll was playing really well, Charlotte FC was playing really well. He leaves the club with I think 42 goal contributions in like 80 games, something amongst that line. So for a player that never had a proper, 10 to work with or somebody that could be at his level, he produced for Charlotte. And let's not forget the only goal that we have in a true playoff game now is Karol Swiderski, in
Yeah,
Orlando, right? So I'm not going to count that playing game against the Red Bulls that we had, 2 seasons ago.
yeah,
Those goals. But that to me, that was the first official like playoff match where we've seen a goal. And he came in, he believed in this club when there was nothing there, right? So I mean, that's a big step for a player, who's a Polish international, came here. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out,
mhm,
for him to be able to stay. And that player, I think to me, in an ideal world, in for what I would have wanted this season was to have him and Patrick Ajiman kind of sharing those minutes because I think they're two different profile of strikers, right? So,
Mhm.
but yeah, definitely Karol Swiderski for me.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I looked on transfer market departure list and I'm like, there's not too many that like my heart breaks over, right? There are a couple who I'm like, oh, I wish I would have gotten, Jalen Lindsay, I wish would have gotten
Yeah,
a better chance. But the other players who are like, they just didn't fit, and you had to find somebody who could fit your system because otherwise they're just names on a piece of paper. So I think Swiderski stands out as the guy that is going to be missed the most. But again, I think you'll be fine, right? You bring in Zaha, it's a like for like, and now you're looking at a front. You've got Abada, you've got BL, you've got Pat, you've got Zaha. That's a terrifying front four. Like, I don't think there are very many front fours in MLS that are that complete. And
100%.
even
Perfect
if
word of saying.
yeah, and even if Lyle Abada doesn't work out, I think Vargas behind him, great. I think Tavares was somebody that I thought had a lot higher of a a lot more to prove or show than he showed in 24. Like there is so much untapped potential there, and I do want to ask, like, which player are you watching who's going to be the next Pat Odgman to break out? Who's this breakout guy that we're supposed to be watching? Because I feel like there's so much potential in this team for a lot of players that people don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, there's a couple of more renowned names like Nimfasha, right, who just went and tried out for Manchester United. I think he's going to have a little bit more difficult time finding minutes this season with the type of with Zaha, with Abada kind of in this squad, right? Somebody I would keep an eye out for would be a guy like maybe Idan Toklomati. So I mean, they spent a sizable amount of money for a guy like this, right? And so I think he's a guy that could break in, right? That can play that striker role, right? So if I think this window they go and try to add a veteran striker to help out Patrick Ajiman, but I also wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those minutes are taken up by Idan Toklomati, who can play any of the positions up top. And so he's really has a chance to break in, right? Because like you said, like we'll know the front three that are starting in Abada, in Zaha and Patrick Ajiman, but I'm not too convinced that Vargas and Yuri Tavares I'm convinced that a guy like Toklomati can compete for minutes with a guy like Vargas and a guy like Yuri Tavares.
Interesting. Yeah, that one didn't pop up on my list, but that's why we do these because there are people who know this more than me. I am just begging for a Neem Fasha breakout year. Like, and I don't even care if it's a starter. Like, give him a sub role where he gets 15 minutes a game. That's all I'm asking because this dude is just one of the most hyped players I've seen in MLS for a long time. Like, Kayvon Sullivan overshadows him, but I don't know why. Because I think Neem Fasha has a much higher ceiling personally. Like just watching them play. Now again, there's a little bit of an age difference there, but I
Yeah.
I love watching this guy play. I mean, and at his age, it feels like there's the sky's the limit for him. Um,
100%. I mean, he's done a training at Bayern Munich, a trial at Bayern Munich. He's done a trial at Manchester United. From what I know, there's teams in Serie A. Some of the top teams are also monitoring him. So, I mean, he's got a bright future ahead of him, right? And so, I'd love to see him also get some minutes this season. And so, I think Dean was way more hype about him last year than he is going into this season, though. That's the sense I'm getting.
Yeah. Well, and that would make sense because I think last season, again, from an outsider looking in, last season it felt like, oh, maybe there's a chance you can break in here because Swiderski didn't know if he's come back or not. You had, that those areas he would play in, like they weren't as strong as they are this year. So I would understand where the hype kind of dies down just a little bit there. But yeah, I'm just begging, just give him 15 minutes a game. That's all that's all I need. Yeah, so while we get into 2025 here, right, we're talking about all these players coming in and leaving and who's going to break out, but in general, for the team as a whole or the situation, like what is the one big question that still hasn't really been answered or that you're still curious about going into the season?
I think it's will Zaha be that talisman player, right? That's what the fan base has asked for the last 3 years,
Mhm.
right? Who is the guy that's going to take this team and put him on their shoulders when it's a tight situation? We've seen that with players like Lucho Acosta, right? Even Drusi a couple of seasons ago for Austin, where they had that run, right? There's always certain players that the team can count on that can take them out of a certain situation, and we've never seen that. And obviously, everything is set for Zaha to be that guy. Now he has to go in and fulfill that role where, if we see the best Zaha, we'll see Charlotte fighting for a top three spot in the East.
I'm not going to spoil anything because we do have predicted finishes coming up. But the Charlotte and people who know after we do this, Connor and I, my co-host who isn't here, we sit down and have a full predictions, standings, bold predictions, all this sort of stuff. We go in and predict a whole bunch of stuff. Charlotte is going to be the focus of a lot of my predictions this year because I'm very, very high on them.
Nice.
So my big question is, listen, they were the best defensive team in the East last year by a wide margin. Like it wasn't particularly close, and that was kind of due to the Dean Smith system. And I'm curious with the players that he has now, is there going to be a system change? Is he going to stick with that? And if he does end up sticking with that, is it going to hurt the output of players like Zaha, who may not get on the ball as much, or who may be asked to defend a little bit more than usual? Or even will it work to begin with? So kind of how Dean Smith utilizes players like this is something I'm kind of curious to see.
Nice. So I think there's two really good indicators of that heading into this season, right? The first one was when they made the switch last year from, playing when they held the ball in possession, they played a back three with Tim Ream, with Andrew Privet sliding back in Malanda, right?
Mhm.
And then heading into this season, right, they let go of a guy, in my opinion, that shouldn't have been let go of, Yero Ronan, who was a left back that we desperately needed that in the second season, and we were able to fill that role with him. And they just let go of Joao Pedro, another left back, right? So to me, it seems like we're going to continue to play in that system where, Nate is going to play a little bit higher up, and we're going to go into a back three in possession. And so that's where my concerns are more in terms of can we stick to that high level of being a difficult team to break down, right? Because you also have to think about it. Kalina had a spectacular season, right? Now, is he going to have a really good season? That's truly what we need, right? Because he was just exceptional last year, right? And so those are the things where will we concede a little bit more, right? But to me, having a guy like Zaha gives us that benefit of, like I said, like if you look at some of the Crystal Palace teams that he played for, sometimes when you're playing big teams, you got to stay tight and compact and hope
Mhm.
for him to do something and make some magic. And I think that fits perfectly into what Dean tries to do with Charlotte FC, where it's, hey, you know, let's make sure that we're checking the X's and O's of what we need to do, and we have a guy in Zaha that could change the game at any minute.
Yeah, like I said, when they signed him, my first thought, I got a buddy who's a big Charlotte fan. He's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, dude, Zaha in transition is going to be Bouanga-esque in terms of effectiveness. Like it's going to be
100%.
dangerous, dude.
Yeah. And also you got to think about it too, like so they knew going into this window, Almiron was available and Zaha was kind of in the works, right? And they said, okay, well, Almiron, Zaha has more of that physique kind of potential that we don't have on the wing, right? We have guys like Almiron, quote unquote, in
Right.
Abada, in other players, right? And so that profile of winger that Zaha is, was way more enticing. And I think they're right. I think that's what we needed more than not. It's easy to say that now, looking at Almiron going to Atlanta but coming to Charlotte. But I think if it would have went the other way where we signed Almiron, I would still be saying this.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, and that was always the fun part. We were talking about. I was like, yeah, we love how ambitious they're being, but they got to get something over the line. Like I love that they were linked to Jamie Vardy and they were linked to Almiron and they were linked to all these players. Nothing got over the line. They got Pep Biel on a last minute, whim, right? They had to get something over the line, and I like the Zaha move,
Yeah.
and I think a
And
lot of people
honestly,
should.
out of all the deals that they've done, this was the most complicated one they could have done because they had to negotiate with Lyon, right? Because, Galatasaray had him on loan at
Hmm.
Lyon, so they have to figure that out. They have to figure this out and convince him that MLS is the right move for him, right? So, out of all the deals, I think this wasn't the easiest, and this is the one that they got done.
Yeah, and I think it's going to pay off. But I do want to ask, we got all this hype. I mean, anybody who's listening can tell there's a lot of hype in this team right now. Where does that hype translate to in terms of standings? Where do you think they're going to finish this year?
Nice. I think we'll finish in a top four position, right? And I'm more confident on that as well because we just saw the transfer of Cucho, right, to Betis. We're most likely not going to see Acosta at Cincinnati, right? So these teams that are right there in the top three, right? are having significant losses, especially Cincy, especially the Ohio teams, right? And so I think that opens up the door where, if Charlotte can just st play to what they played last year and add that X factor of Zaha, we could really push for a top three, top four spot. And I think I'm very bullish on this team, and I think they have everything that it takes. And also, I liked that, at the end of last year when they got eliminated, right? They said, you know what, going into next season, we have to make sure top four is kind of our standard. They all know that. That's what they want. They can feel it. They all felt like if they went through that Orlando game, they would have went to the MLS Cup final, right? So that ambition heading into the season is important, right? And that starts from the captain, Ashley Westwood, who first said that. And when you have leaders like him, Tim Ream in that locker room as well, right? I mean, the sky's the limit for this team. So I'm very bullish, right? Before it's more of a hope. Now there's actually stuff on paper that we can point to say that there's actually a legitimate opportunity for it.
I think you put that really, really well. And I don't want, like I said, I don't want to spoil the preseason prediction video that we're going to do too early, but I am equally as high on this team. And I did this prep before Cucho was gone, before the Acosta rumor was done. I have this team top 1 to 4 without before all
Nice.
that happened. And now it's almost like a lock. Like I won't give away my big predictions, but I don't think it is crazy to say that within the last quarter of the season Charlotte still has a legitimate chance to win a supporter shield. Like I don't think
Yeah.
it's a crazy thing to say
Yeah. I don't
because they've
think
got they've got a great coach. Like you said, if Kalina was out of his mind last year, if he's 75% of what he was last year, you guys are great in the back. You keep Malanda throughout the year, you guys are set. The midfield is balanced. Like it feels balanced. You've got the attacking side of it.
perfect
You've got
word to
to
put.
I think Eric Williamson is the perfect piece to add to that. You've got depth on the wings. Patrick Odjiman, I think, is set for a really big breakout year. There's just so much about this that I love, and I've got them 1 to 4, and it's not 4 or 3. I'll tell you that.
Wow, nice. I love that. And here's another thing too that I would add that maybe you don't know or that you're not truly privy to, right? So like one of my concerns, and I asked this to, Dean Smith and, the sporting director, right, of Charlotte FC. I was like, what kind of mindset is Zaha coming into, right? Because to me, that's important, right?
Right. Oh
Is he
yeah.
coming here, you know what, like I'm tired of Europe, like MLS may be quote unquote easy,
Hmm.
right? And Dean Smith actually had dinner with the player before they signed him, right? Before that he really committed because he wants to make sure that anybody that he's bringing in that DP caliber has the right mindset to help this team. And that's truly important because we've seen guys like Shaqiri come into this league, right, where they have the talent, but they don't have the mentality, right? And that was a concern of mine with Zaha, but I think having a guy like Dean Smith who knows and understands how important, right, a player of that caliber can be, he wants to make sure that the mindset is right. And that to me, that's what makes me very bullish on that, right? Because at the end of the day, you never know. This guy just didn't have the best of time at Galatasaray, didn't have the best time of Lyon, right? So what kind of trajectory is he going into? And it feels like they're everything that they're doing is to make sure that he one is comfortable here and two he can put his best foot forward for this team. The first day that he landed in Charlotte, they did a team dinner with him, right? To make sure he felt like he was coming into a family.
Man, Dean Smith seems like the type of coach I want to be and I want to play for, and he just is like he embodies everything that coaching should be. Like everything I hear about him is so like to a T what a coach should do. So I like I said I would run through every single wall if he told me to. So I am all here for it, and that's as a Red Bull supporter. Like I don't want them to be good because I want Red Bull to be good, and I can't stop at the hype, man. I think they're gonna be so solid. All right, well. All right, thanks so much for being here, man. I think this was such a great informative chat for our listeners. If not, we've got a lot of people's hopes up. So, we've done something here today. I want to give you a minute to tell people where to find you and your work and what you do.
Yeah, thank first of all, thank you so much for inviting us, right? So I love seeing other people like create content for MLS, right? Because I think slowly but surely we're transitioning, the random European fan, South American fan into, oh, this is a retirement league, nobody pays attention to it, to wow, there's some really superstar. We've got Lionel Messi in this league now, so And I think I'm so bullish on MLS too and where it can go. And I think having more people speak about this league and where it's headed. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing with your pod, And so you can find us at TopBin90 on all our socials, right? We primarily are covering Charlotte FC. We're there. We've been there since day one and we're not going anywhere, man. So we've been there through the good, the bad, the ugly. And it feels like we're going into a really good season. And I truly hope for the fans here that it's a very special season. I think last season was a very special season. We just didn't expect it to be a special season.
We also didn't even touch on the fact that you guys have one of the best fan bases in the league. I went to one of those games. It was the middle of the summer, had nothing to do with, we had no fight, no, I mean, there was not like win this game and get in or whatever. It meant realistically, it meant nothing. You guys had 30K people there dancing, bouncing, singing. I was like, this, and everybody all in for Charlotte. Like there were no, when you go to Red Bull games, it's, you know, five Inter Miami jerseys, seven Man United jerseys. Like it's all just people just
Yeah.
being there.
Listen, I was
Everybody.
I was at the playing game where we lost 5-2 to you guys.
uh
And I was like, bro, I was like, all of us, like, we had a sizable amount of people. Like, it wasn't crazy, but it'd be
mhm.
300 plus for that playing game. Right. And I was like, dude, if this was in Charlotte, we would have this thing packed out right now.
Yeah.
Bumping, right? And so that's what my favorite thing, man, about that is like when we have the neutral or casual that's never been to Charlotte game and they feel the soccer atmosphere. That's something
Mhm.
I've been living in Charlotte my whole life. And that is such a cool thing to experience now because growing up, I'm like a big Liverpool Barca fan. So I would watch, but I'm not there. So like it's very different when you're there, when you're seeing it, when you're experiencing, when the crowd roars, when Kalina stops a penalty in a playoff game and we force a game three. The electric vibe. I mean, the 4-0 against Chicago last year. Like, there's been so many moments like that like I love when new fans come and they're like, dude, this is amazing.
I'm telling you, if we had every, and I use this term lightly, so I hope people don't get upset. If we had every Euro snob in America go to one game, just one game, and make it a game that matters, right? Make it a playoff game or something like that. You would not hear half of the complaints that you have because being in the stadium is what makes it special. I
100%.
mean, you just can't fight it. But all right, thanks again so much for being here. We really, really enjoyed this chat. We hope everybody else did as well. And we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.
Thank you.